Welcome to this tutorial, where I'll show you how to build a comprehensive manufacturing quality control database in Baserow. Let's start by exploring what we want to achieve. I need to build a quality management system with these key requirements. First, I want a comprehensive production quality track. Each batch needs to move through quality checkpoints with inspections recorded, pass-fail results documented, and detailed findings captured for full traceability. Secondly, I need a robust defect management and analysis system. When quality issues arise, they must be categorized, analyzed for root causes, and tracked from discovery through to resolution. Third, I want an effective corrective action planning. For every significant defect, I need corrective and preventative actions with clear ownership, deadlines, and status tracking. Finally, I need quality reporting and analytics with trend analysis, defect patterns, and compliance documentation for regulatory requirements. Let me first show you what the finished database looks like. Here's my production system with 8 products across 5 different product types, from mechanical components to consumer electronics. You can see each product has defined quality standards and target production rates. For example, our motor housing requires a dimensional tolerance of 0.05 millimeters and a target production rate of 120 per day. Here is batch 008 for our coffee maker. You can see the planned quantity, the actual quantity, and automatically calculated yield rate. Using a formula field here, we can see that this changes when we update the actual quantity. So here our yield rate becomes 83, which is of course a percentage, which we can show creating a suffix at the end of this formula. Every batch has quality inspections, which comes from this table, which also has different types of inspection, from incoming inspections to in-process inspections and final inspection, with the pass rate automatically being calculated. As you can see, this batch has achieved a 100% quality score. When defects are found, they are logged with the severity level, root cause analysis, and cost impact. This dimensional variance defect has been open for 50 days and already has a corrective action assigned to it. Each defect triggers corrective actions, such as this machine spindle maintenance, which is assigned to Sarah Chen with a clear due date and some status tracking. Now let's take a look at the database structure. The core entity is production batches. This tracks each manufacturing run. We have 4 main entity groups: production tracking tables for batches and products, quality management tables for inspections and defects, action tracking for corrective measures, and supporting reference tables for categories and employees. The production batches table is our central hub. Each batch needs a unique batch number, links to the product being manufactured, planned and actual quantities, production line assignment, and operator information. The yield rate and quality score are calculated automatically from related data. Quality inspections track each quality checkpoint. They link to the batch being inspected, the type of inspection, and the inspector responsible. The pass count and sample size and pass rate create our quality metrics, while the test results capture the detailed findings. The defects table captures quality issues with categorization by type and severity. Each defect includes the quantity affected. root cause analysis, and cost impact. And the days open field automatically tracks the aging of these defects. Corrective actions link to specific defects and track our response. They include the action that we're taking, the action description, assigned owners, the type of action, the priority of each action, start dates and due dates, and status progression, which tracks a project from not started all the way through to verified. Production batches have multiple quality inspections. Quality inspections can identify multiple defects. Defects then trigger multiple corrective actions, where employees can serve as operators, inspectors, or action owners. And products link to their respective product types and to their respective production lines. Now that we have a good introduction into what we want to build, let's walk through how we build it from scratch. I'll create a new database to do this, and we will call it Manufacturing QC Build. As per usual, we start off with a new table called Table and our 3 default fields, which we can either delete or update depending on our preference. We also need to rename the table appropriate. First, I'll be creating the supporting tables, since main tables will reference these. So let's start with the products types category for our products. So we'll rename this table to product types. We'll keep the name field as it is. And for notes, we're going to change this to description. And we're going to change this field to be our quality requirements field. And it's also going to be a long text field. And now we need to add in our data for the types of product categories. To speed this process up, I'm just going to copy and paste from our template. And that's our product types table completed. The next table we're going to create is our employees table, which is going to need our name field, an email field, a password field, a phone field, a job role field, which is going to be a single select with the options operator, inspector, engineer, and manager. We then need a long text field for our certifications. And finally, another single select field for our shift assignments. And here we're going to have the options for day, night, and evening. With our fields set up, we can now copy and paste the data from our template to populate our records. Obviously, in your case, you'll be adding your real data. We can see that passwords have not been set. This is normal because you cannot copy and paste that data. But we can also see that we need to fill in our single select. So I'm going to just copy and paste that data in separately for both this field, which we forgot to name, as our job role field. And then we need to add in the data for our shift assignments. I'm going to set every password just to a default of 1, 2, 3. And with that, we have concluded our employees table. We'll now do similar for our inspection types table, where here we'll be needing a name field, a description field, a standard procedures field, which is also a long text. And then we need 2 number fields, one for the required sample size, and the second one for our pass threshold. With our field set up, we can now bring in the data. And as per usual, I'll be using the dummy data from our template. That's all we need for now for our inspection types. We can now add a table for our defects types, where we'll be needing a name, a description, which will remain as a long text. We then need standard root causes. which will also be a long text field. And then lastly, we need a single select field for the severity type. And here we'll be creating the options minor, cosmetic, major, and lastly, critical. With those fields set up, we can bring in our data. And that's it for our defect types table. We can then move on to our production lines table, which track our manufacturing equipment. Each line has a name, description, location, capacity, and status field, as well as 2 date fields for last maintenance and next maintenance. We'll update our long text again for a description. We'll then delete this one as usual. We'll set up a single line text for our location. We'll create a number field for our capacity. We'll create a single select, which will be for our status. And here we'll have the options of active, inactive. We'll then create a date field, which will be tracking the last maintenance date. And finally, we'll create the last date field for the next maintenance date. And with that, we can bring in our data. And that concludes our production line state and all our helper tables. Let's move on to the main tables. Now we can finally begin creating our main operational tables. Let's start off with our products table first. As per usual, we'll keep the name field. The first field we're actually going to add is going to be our first link to table field. And this one is going to be a link to our product types. We could then create a new long text field for our quality standards, a number field for our target production rate, a date field to show when it was created date, a single select field for our status, and here we'll have the options of active, under development, and lastly, discontinued. And finally, we'll have one more link to table field, and that is going to be a link to our employees table, where we're going to call this the responsible engineer. We can now populate this table with data, including the relationships. And that concludes everything that we need for our products table. Let's move on to our main table, product batches. Let's start as usual by creating our table for production batches. This is going to be the first table. We're actually going to rename our primary field from name to batch number. We're going to keep it as a single line text. The first one we're going to add in is a link to table for our product. We are then going to create a new number field for our planned quantity, another number field for our actual quantity. We're then going to add 2 date fields, one for the start date, and of course, one for the end date. We're then going to have another link to table, which is going to be to our production lines. We then need the batch status, which is going to be a single select. And this is going to have the options of completed, in progress, on hold, and of course, rejected. We're going to need another link to table. This is going to be to the employees, and we're going to rename it to the operator. We then need another single select field, which is going to define the shift. And here we're going to have day, evening, and night as our available shift options. We'll then finally have another long text field, and I'm going to call this. And for now, the last field that we're going to add is going to be our first formula field. So add a formula field. We're going to rename it to yield rate. And the formula we're going to use, I'm going to copy and paste here. And this formula calculates the batch yield rate against the actual quantity divided by the planned quantity. It does this encased in an if statement, whereby if it's not greater than 0, then return 0. What we've done, we can click create. It's going to come with some zeros here. We actually want to change that decimal places just to 0. We're going to add a suffix here to make sure that we know that this is a percent. Of course, it default to 0 because there's no data in here. We can now add in the dummy data. And as we do that, we'll see, because we have the values in our planned quantity and actual quantity, that the formula is now calculating correctly. The first one of those tables is the quality inspections table. We're going to start off as usual by deleting the 2 unnecessary fields. And what we want to do here is we want to use a formula for our primary field. But in order to do that, we're first going to have to create another reference field that formula is going to reference. And that is going to be a date field for the inspection date. So let's create that first. Call it inspection date. And now we can change our name field from a single line text to a formula. We're going to call it inspection ID. And the formula we're going to use is going to be this, which is a concatenation of the letters QI and a dash, followed by the year of this inspection date field that we've just created, another dash, and then the row ID for this record. When we create this, we're going to see that it populates it here, but there is no data inside the date here. But as soon as we add data to this date, it will populate inside this. We'll then create a link to table field. We call this inspection type because it's going to be a link to the inspection types. We're going to create a link for a batch, and of course it's going to be to our production batches. We're going to create a third link here, which is going to be called inspector, which is a link to the employees field, employees table. We're then going to create 2 number fields. We're going to call the first one sample size. The second one is going to be called our pass count. And then we can use a second formula field here. And this is going to be sale count, which is going to be a very basic formula where we're just going to take the sample size and subtract the pass count from that. And that will give us our fail count. We're then going to add our second formula field, which is for our pass rate. Create that. Again, we're going to go in and change it to 0 decimal places. We're going to give it the suffix of a percentage because this is a percentage value. We then need to have our first single select field, which is going to be our overall result. Our first option is going to be pass, followed by conditional pass, followed by fail. We're then going to create our first long text field. It's going to be called test results. To then have a secondary long text field, which is for notes. And then the last field we're going to create for now in this table is going to be a Boolean field, and that is going to hold the data of corrective action required or not. That looks like about it for now. So let's bring in our dummy data. Instead of pasting now from inspection ID, which is what I would normally do, that being a formula field, we're actually going to start from inspection date, and this will be automatically populated. So I'm going to paste in that data, and we'll see that all the inspection IDs update correctly according to the data that's being filled in the other fields. There is also one more field we need to add in here, which is going to be a link to table for the defects field. But seeing as we haven't created that table yet, let's do that now, and then we'll be able to come back and add that. or rather we'll actually be able to add that from the defects table directly. So let's go ahead and create our defects table. As standard, we're going to then straight away delete the 2 unnecessary fields. And like our quality inspections table, we want to use a formula in our first primary field. But in order to do that, we need another reference field, which is going to be our date field, and it's going to be for the discovery date. And once we have that, we can now create our primary field, which is going to be called defect ID, and it's going to be a formula field. It's going to be another concatenation we had done before in quality inspections. It's going to concat these 3 items again together. And because we don't have any data yet in discovery date, of course, it's blank there. We're then going to create our first link to table called batch, and it's going to link to our production batches. The next link to table is going to be called the related inspection, which is going to be, of course, to our quality inspections. We then need another link to table, which is going to be the defect type, which is to our helper table for defect types. We're then going to create a single select field, which is going to hold the severity. And here we're going to have cosmetic, minor, major, and critical as our options. We then have a number field for our quantity affected. Then have 2 long text fields, one for our description, and the second one is going to be for our root cause. We'll have another link to table here, going to be called discovered by, and it's a link to our employees table. Single select field, which is going to be called status, and this is going to have all the options of open, resolved, under investigation, and closed. We'll then have another number field here, which is going to define our cost impact. And we're going to add a prefix to this field with the dollar symbol, as this is going to be monetary, followed by another single select field, which is going to be our customer impact, which can either be none, low, medium, high, or critical. Finally, we're going to have a formula field, which is going to host the formula for how many days these items have been opened. And the formula we're going to use for that is going to make use of the date diff function here. And it's going to be a comparison between the fields of discovery date and the function of today, which is going to bring today's date. When we do that, we'll get nothing returned to us because we don't have data in those fields. So let's populate this with some data. Again, we're starting from the discovery date field. And we do need one more item in this, which is going to be a reference to another table we need to create, which is, of course, our last remaining table, which is going to be corrective actions. So let's create corrective actions. As usual, let's delete the 2 fields. And again, with corrective actions, we're going to use a formula field for the primary field, but that's going to be reliant, of course, on another field. So let's create that first, and it is going to be a date field for our start date. Once we've done that, we can now update our primary field to action ID, which is going to be a formula field, where again, we're going to use a formula that concatenates several fields together and give us identification. Let's then begin creating our links. The first link to table is going to be related defect, which is, of course, a link to the defects table. Then let's create our action title, which is going to be a single line text. We'll also need an action description, which we're going to use a long text field for. And lastly, we're going to need an action type, which we're going to use the single select field for. Types of actions that we're going to have are going to be corrective, immediate, and preventive. Create another single select field. We'll call this one priority, and we'll give it the options of low, medium, high, and urgent. Our next link to table field is going to be the assigned to field, which is going to be a reference to the employees table. Then have a date field for the due date. Just for the sake of making everything look neat, we're going to change that position to next to the start date. And we're also going to have a date here, which is going to be our completion date. And let's put that next to our due date. We're then going to have another single select field, which is going to be our status. And inside here, we're going to have the different states that these corrective actions can be in. So the first one is going to be started. The next one will be in progress, completed, closed, and verified. When something is verified, you need to know how it was verified. So in order to do that, you need a verification method, which will be a single text. And what we also want to know is when it was verified. So let's also add a date field for verification date. We'll probably also need to know then the effectiveness of everything. So let's add a single select field and start adding options for how effective these were as corrective actions, partially effective, effective, and of course, not effective. Then add a number field, which is going to be our cost. We're going to keep this to 2 decimal places and add the suffix of a dollar symbol so that we know this is a money field. We're going to now add a formula field, which is going to calculate our days overdue. It's going to check if something is completed and then check the difference between the due date and today. And if it isn't completed, it will return 0. If it is, it's going to tell us the answer. So we'll create that formula here. We're then going to need a second formula field to do a calculation for us. So we'll use a formula to give us that answer. Hit create. And that concludes this table. So let's bring in our dummy data into it. And now all our data is in there, and we can check our formulas are in fact working. Seems to be the case. That concludes our last table that we needed to create. We can now circle back to our production purchase table and add the last 2 fields that were reliant on some of the missing tables that we didn't have before when we created it. And that table is going to be, first of all, a lookup. It's going to be a lookup of quality inspections. We're going to call it quality score, and it's going to look up the pass rate. We're going to keep the settings as they are. And then just to add extra clarity to this, we're going to insert another one to the right. And this time it's going to be a roll up. And this one is going to be quality score average. I'm going to set the pass rate field, just as we did in lookup, but this time we're going to apply a lookup function, and it's going to be average. We're going to click create, and that's going to give us an average of all the scores together. And that's it. Our database is now fully complete for the tables and the schema. And now we can look at creating very specific views for very specific tasks that we want to make more efficient. So let's start off with our first view. And this is going to be a grid view. We're going to call this the active production dashboard. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to create 2 filters because our purpose here is to monitor the currently running production. So we're going to add a filter here to say that batch status is in progress. And we're also going to add another or filter here and say that batch status is on hold, because we also want to see that things are on hold, because that's not a permanent state and requires our attention. I think it would also make sense for us to sort this by the newest date. So we're going to add a sort to this, and it's going to be on our start date. And we're going to do this from descending order, so 9 to 1, which will make the first one our most recent start date. I think another thing that would make sense about statuses is to have a Kanban view of this. So we'll call a production Kanban board for our new view. We'll select Kanban as the view type. We'll add that, and we'll sort this or group this by the status field. And now we can choose which items to hide from these cards by going to customize cards. And I don't think we need to plan quantity, but the start and end dates make sense. And I would say also very good for us to know who the operator is for these. And just like we have a usable Kanban where we can update items very easily. Another thing that we can do, of course, again with status involved, is to create a quality performance view. And the purpose of this view would be to identify the best or the worst performing batches. We're going to add a status in here, batch status, a filter, sorry. And this is going to be his completed. And now what we want to do is sort our data by the performance. So we'll sort it by the quality score, and we're going to make it go from descending order, so from high to low. Now this view is still a little bit cluttered, so we're going to hide some fields. And we're going to hide a lot of fields here, so it's going to be quicker to actually just hide all. And we'll turn on products. We definitely want yield rate and quality inspections. And lastly, we also want the quality score, of course, because that's what we're sorting on. And this is a good quick performance view, I would say. Another view that we might need is another grid view, and it's going to be for overdue production. And the purpose of this is going to flag batches taking too long. And we're going to do that by applying two filters. The first one is going to be obviously that batch status is in progress. And then to see if something overdue, we're going to add an and filter here. And we're going to say end date. And we're going to make that is before today. Luckily, good news is we don't have any items that match that, which means we don't have any overdue production. Probably another useful one here is we could create a daily report for our production. Obviously, the purpose of this just being to create a summary of today's production. So we're going to add that in. And we're going to use two filters here, which is that the start date is today, or the end date is today. And that would give us a report. What we can actually do already that will make it even better is we'll group this by the production lines. Again, there's no results because there's nothing actually meeting the criteria of start or end date being today. But ideally, if you have a lot of data here, this will create a report of what happened today, grouped by production line. I think that's enough views for production batches. So let's move on to quality inspections. And similarly to what we've just done, we're going to create a report for today. So we're going to call it today's inspections. And this is going to be the most basic filter where we just say that the inspection date is today. The next one we can make is going to be another grid. And we're going to call it failed inspections. And the purpose of this one obviously is to track quality issues requiring our attention. And we're going to do that by saying that our overall result is fail, or our overall result is conditional pass. And maybe I'd like to take this a bit further and quickly be able to differentiate between those two. So I'm going to add a background color. I'm going to make it based on condition. I'm going to make it red. And I'm going to make this a condition for when the overall result is fail. Luckily, we don't have any of those. And then I'm going to add another color here. I'm going to make this one yellow. And I'm going to add condition overall result is conditional pass. But should we have a fail in here, it will highlight as red. Another good one that we're going to need to do is we're going to create a new grid view again for the inspector performance. And what we want to do here is just be able to quickly monitor for inspector consistency. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to group this by the inspector. And then we're going to reduce noise. And we're going to do that by hiding everything except for the metrics that matter to us, which is going to be the pass count and pass rate. With that, we can quickly get a good overview of how each inspector is doing for their performance. Another view that we can create is going to be a calendar. We can call this the inspection calendar. And what we're going to do here is choose which date field we're going to filter by. We only have one date field inside this table, so leave it at that, inspection date. We're going to click save, and this has already populated everything. There's nothing in September, but if we move back a few months to July, we can see what our calendar would look like if the dummy data was being updated on a daily basis. So let's move on to our defects table and create some views. So let's move to our defects table, and we're going to create a new grid view. And this is going to be an important one to see which open defects are still there. So we're going to create this, a filter by status is closed. We'll also create a sort for this so that we can see which ones were discovered the latest. So those are going to be our priority because they're the oldest. And then also, just for good measure, let's also create some background coloring here for conditions. And we're going to base this on the severity field. And we're going to make this one for major. And we're going to add another color, just going to be red. And we're going to add this one for severity. It's critical. And that way we can see very quickly if there's any kind of major or critical issues inside here that really demand our attention. I'm going to add something quite closely related, and it's going to be our critical defects alert. And this one is going to be not when the status is closed, when the status is opened. In fact, it would probably be better to say is not closed. That way we get all the other three, which are technically also possibly still open. And then, of course, we want to add a AND filter here where the severity is critical. And this is going to be our critical defects alert page. Another thing that we might want to do is to identify the stale defects. We're going to create a new grid view for this. We'll call it defect aging report. We're going to add a filter here for the status. And we only want these to be ones that are technically open. So we're going to put it as open. We're going to add another one for or, and status is under investigation. And then, of course, because we want it to be aging, we're going to add a sort here. And it's going to be a sort on days open. And it's going to be counting in a descending order. So we'll do that. And what that means now is that this list is going to be sorted by the ones that have been open for the longest. Last but not least, let's also create a summary for this. So our summary view is going to be our month defect summary. And we're going to group this one by the defect type. And in order to see the defects from the current month, we're going to apply a filter whereby the discovery date is after 1 month ago. And that will show us items that are in the current month or in the future. And that concludes our views for our defects table. So let's now move on to our corrective actions tables and create views there. So let's move on to our corrective actions table. And the first one we're going to do is create a Kanban view. And we're going to call this the action workflow board. And this is going to be a board that will handle our corrective and preventive action workflow management. And when we create this, we will of course be grouping this by the status field. And if we wanted to, we could customize these cards further to add the details that we want to show inside them. But I'm going to leave it as it is for now. The next view that we can create inside of corrective actions is going to be a grid view, and it's going to be for the overdue actions events. The purpose of this is just simply for accountability and escalation purposes. And we're going to get this by creating a filter that is going to be on our days overdue, and that is going to be lower than 0 because of course our days overdue counts into the negative numbers, so it must be therefore lower than 0. And then again, because we're dealing with negative numbers, we're going to sort this by days overdue, and we're going to keep it to the ascending order because of the negative numbers. That about wraps it up for the corrective actions views. And also overall for the views that we need to create for our tables. We could also consider creating some additional views for our supporting tables, such as a product quality summary or production line performance, but I'll leave that up to you to add these details into your own tables. And with that, now that our views are all complete, that is the end of building out our database and schema for our manufacturing quality control build. So to conclude this video, we've built a comprehensive manufacturing quality control database that provides complete production batch tracking with automatic yield calculations, structured quality inspections with pass rate monitoring, defect management with root cause analysis, corrective action workflows with clear accountability, and automated calculations and status tracking throughout. This database gives you a solid foundation for manufacturing quality control. You can customize the product types, inspection criteria, and defect categories to match your specific manufacturing environment. And next, we'll build a comprehensive application on top of this database to create a complete quality management system. Thanks for watching.